We're going to learn the Maamar Mareihem Umaaseihem, which is in Torah Or Parshas Yisro. First of all, the Maamar has quite a history. If you look in the notes in the back of the Torah Or, he mentions, and I believe it's in the Hayom as well, that this Maamar Mareihem Umaaseihem is not a Maamar from the Alter Rebbe. It's actually a Maamar from the Mezritcher Maggid. In fact, it's a Maamar from the Mezritcher Maggid that the Alter Rebbe did not hear from the Mezritcher Maggid, because the Mezritcher Maggid said it before the Alter Rebbe arrived in Mezritch. In fact, it was the very, very first Maamar the Mezritcher Maggid ever said, Shvuas Tav Kuf Chaf Aleph. And I'll tell you the story momentarily. What it says, however, is that I think that Tzemach Tzedek said to the Rebbe Marash that this Maamar Mareihem Umaaseihem in Torah Or in Parshas Yisro is the same Maamar that the Mezritcher Maggid said Shvuas Tav Kuf Chaf Aleph in Mezritch, as the Alter Rebbe heard it from the Mendele Haradoker, the Baal Machaber Sefer Pri Haaretz, but that the Alter Rebbe said it b'signoi noi. The Alter Rebbe said it in his own language. This is the very first Maamar of the Mezritcher Maggid when the Mezritcher Maggid became a Rebbe. It's kind of incredible. And in general, the Maamar of the Alter Rebbe, if you read the Alter Rebbe's Torah, you are staggered by the volume of the Maamarim and the unbelievable variety of original ideas. It's absolutely brilliant. It's unbelievable. The Alter Rebbe is just a fountain of creativity and revelation of Pnimis HaTorah. But we all know, because we read about it in the Sichos, is that he had Rebbes who planted seeds in the Alter Rebbe that the Alter Rebbe would develop in his Torah. But we so rarely have opportunity to access those seeds, to be able to see how the Alter Rebbe took and created. I have a friend who publishes the Baal Shem Tov magazine, I forgot what it's called, it comes out in Barpark, Hechel Menachem, Nachum Greenwald, he's a classmate of mine who's done some research trying to show links between the Maamarim of the Alter Rebbe and his Rebbes. It's a fascinating search, and it's not an easy search to do because you're looking through a very, very complex and concise body of Torah. But here is a simple, clear, overt example where the Alter Rebbe revealed that this Maamar is not his, so to speak. He heard it from his Rebbe indirectly through the Mendele Vitebsker, and it's the Maamar that the Alter Rebbe said, the Mezritcher Maggid said, on the occasion of his becoming a Rebbe. So it's exciting, it's interesting. So let me tell you the story of the Mezritcher Maggid becoming a Rebbe in brief. It's just worth telling the story, and you don't get opportunities to tell such stories, so I'll tell it to you. The Mezritcher Maggid was from the last great Gdoilim, Tzadikim, Go'onim to join the movement of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. It's brought in the Sichos that when the Baal Shem Tov became a Rebbe, a Tzadik, obviously hundreds and thousands of Amcha, ordinary Jewish people, flocked to him, but he had been mispalel, and he asked from on high to be given Shishim Giboidim, 60 warriors, 60 tzaddikim, which he was granted from on high, and we know the names of, I think, more than half. If you look in the Sfarim that record the Baal Shem Tov, I think they list between 30 and 40 names. But the Baal Shem Tov had 60 disciples, and as the Rebbe tells the story in the Sikha, that the Heilige Maggid got Pishnai, the Mezritcher Maggid had twice as many, 120 Gedalim, 120 members of his Chavraya Kadisha. The Mezritcher Maggid was from the last ones to arrive. When the Mezritcher Maggid arrived, the Alter Rebbe, the Holy Baal Shem Tov, evidently realized that the Maggid was different, special, and that he was destined to be his successor, and there's some very interesting details about that awareness. One of them is that the Baal Shem Tov came to the Heilige Maggid at Rosh Hashanah once, and he said to him, everybody gives a pidyon nefesh to a tzaddik. I want to give a pidyon as well. I'm afraid to give a pidyon. Because when you give a pidyon to somebody else, obviously, you're connected to that person, and that person has to be worthy to take a pidyon nefesh von Heilig and Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov said to the Maggid, Dir hab ich nicht moide zu geben. I'm not afraid to give you a pidyon. And the Holy Baal Shem Tov gave his Talmud, the Holy Maggid of Mezritch, a pidyon nefesh for Rosh Hashanah. This pidyon the Maggid, of course, cherished, and he passed it along to the Alter Rebbe, and that's how that pidyon in this story reached us. It's in the Gniza HaChersonis. Another very interesting episode, also recorded in the Gniza, is that there's a letter from the Baal Shem Tov to the Toldos Yankov Yosef, Rabbi Yankov Yosef Milponah, who was from the very first big Doilim Goinim Tzadikim to join the Holy Baal Shem Tov's movement. And in the letter it's written that the Baal Shem Tov says to the Toldos, I gave you ksavim, all kinds of manuscripts and notes. It doesn't say what they are, it simply says ksavim. And I made a mistake. The ksavim are not for you, they're for the Embeddenu, to the Mesicher Magid. Please give them to the Embeddenu. That's all it says. It's a short little letter. Now, what these ksavim are, we'll never know, but obviously they were of incredible importance, and it's conceivable that the Baal Shem Tov had originally planned that the Heilige Toldos would be Maamar Mareihem Umaaseihem, would be his successor. When the Heilige Magid, when the Holy Mesicher Magid arrived, the Baal Shem Tov realized that this was his successor, and he had the Toldos give the Magid ksavim, manuscripts, that were destined for the Rebbe, for the Yossi, for the Manig Ador, as it were, at that time. There's another story, but this is not from the Rabbi, and this is Chassidim tell the story, that when the Mesicher Magid succeeded the Holy Baal Shem Tov, the Toldos Yankov Yosef came to Mesicher Magid and wondered why was he Zoiche to succession and not him. Why did you become the Rebbe, the Maamar Mareihem of the Holy Baal Shem Tov, and not I? I had been by the Baal Shem Tov for so many years. The Toldos was a very, very big man, and so forth. So the Mesicher Magid answered him as follows. He says, do you remember that in the cheder, in the shtibel, in the office of our Rebbe, the Holy Baal Shem Tov, there was a very, very large chandelier, very, very large lamp? He says, of course. He says, do you ever wonder why the Rebbe needs such a large lamp in his office? He says, yes. He says, do you know why? He says, I have no idea. And he continued, do you remember that the Holy Baal Shem Tov, our Rebbe, used to come from the mikveh Erev Shabbos and lock himself in his room, and no one was allowed to go into him during that period, b'shum mefer, under any conditions? He says, yeah. He says, do you wonder what the Holy Rebbe was doing during those minutes? He says, yeah. He says, do you know what he was doing? He says, I have no idea. So the Magid said to the Toldos, well, I wondered. And I decided that the Friday afternoon seclusion was connected to the big chandelier. So the Heilige Rebbe, the Heilige Baal Shem Tov, went to the mikveh of Shabbos. I went into his room and I hid under the table. The Baal Shem Tov came back from the mikveh, locked his door, locked his windows, closed the curtains, and he took 2 towels, tied them to the chandelier, and the other ends he tied to his wrists, and he started doing yichudim for the neshama to go up. And after a while he stopped, and he said, Emet said his door, someone is in the room. The Baal Shem Tov felt the burden, the heaviness of it all. So I, says the Magid, came out of my hiding place, and very embarrassed, apologized to the Heilige Baal Shem Tov and said to the Baal Shem Tov, I'll leave. I'm sorry I invaded your space. And the Baal Shem Tov said to me, Ist es zu spät? Now it's too late, you can't leave anymore. He told me to take 2 towels, tie them to the chandelier, tie them to my wrists, and then he said, Mirzan and Aruf. The 2 of us went up. Aliyah Shoma that we read about in the Svarim. So they told us, Yankov Yosef to the Heilige Magid, and what did you see? And the Mesicher Magid said, what I saw, I'm not going to tell you. And the Magid explained, that's why he was Eichet to Nesiyas, he was Eichet to succession. This is brought in Sipurim from Chassidim in various Svarim, but not in the names of the Rabbeim. So the Holy Magid, although he was a very late arrival by the Heilige Baal Shem Tov, was destined for nihug, for leadership. But it wasn't simple, it didn't happen right away. The Baal Shem Tov passed away Shavuos, and we know he passed away. The first day Shavuos was a Wednesday, Shavuos, in the year Tov Kuf Chaf, 1760. And obviously there was a Levaya. The Levaya was, it's hard to know when, but Mistama was after Yom Tov. It's hard to know, we don't know for sure. And at the Levaya, the Baal Shem Tov's only son, the Baal Shem Tov had a son and a daughter. Rabbi Tzvi was his son, and Adel was his daughter. His only son was appointed Maamar Mareihem Umaaseihem, his successor. The Heilige Rabbi Tzvi was a very, very, very big tzaddik, and a Gon, and a Kodesh Nalagut Zachen, but he was not a leader. He didn't have leadership qualities. And as a result, the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, who had watched the Holy Baal Shem Tov build the movement of Chassidus so carefully and so painstakingly, watched it crumble, fall to pieces. Because Rabbi Tzvi did not have what it took to lead. And of course, they wouldn't say anything. He was the Rebbe, he was the Nasi, he was the Manhig. They were simply his followers, as great as they were. But it pained them to watch, so to speak, the tree that the Baal Shem Tov had planted so sensitively and so carefully was starting to come apart. Until Shavuos Tavkuf Chaf Aleph, 1 year later exactly. On that occasion, many members of the Holy Society of the Baal Shem Tov, of the Chariot, gathered in Mezhebush by the Rebbe Reb Tzvi, and they were all sitting around the table. Reb Tzvi sat Bereish HaShulchan, he sat at the head of the table, and he said Torah. And after he finished saying Torah, Reb Tzvi said, "The Tatas Bamir gewesen." My father came to me, and then I heard from a Polish, he said, "The jetzt gewesen, das just was here." Und hat mir gesagt, dass der Schchina mit der ganze Pamalie shal Meile geht Ribe zu Rebbeinu. Lass anwünschen Mazel Tov, soll sich setzen auf mein Ort und nicht sich setzen auf sein Ort. Which means in English, he says, my father came to me and he told me that the Shekhinah and the entirely heavenly entourage has gone over to Rebbeinu, the Mezitcher Magid. Let us wish him Mazel Tov, and we'll change seats. He'll come and sit in my seat at the head of the table, and I'll take his seat. And the Reb Tzvi got up, the Hilchah Magid got up, they changed outer outfits because the Rebbe had a velvet, a felt collar, which distinguished him from the rest of the Chabraya. He sat down on the seat of Reb Tzvi, Reb Tzvi sat in the Mezitcher Magid seat, and that's how the Mezitcher Magid became a Rebbe. There was no kisvehis kashas, and there was no politics, and there was no begging and pleading and negotiating. It was that simple. Reb Tzvi said, my father said the Mezitcher Magid is Maamar Mareihem, and that was it. I'm imagining that the Mezitcher Magid had some kind of eros from the Baal Shem Tov as indicated, but this is the way it had to come down. And what was the first thing the Mezitcher Magid did when he sat down on the seat of his father, of his Rebbe Hilchah Baal Shem Tov? He said this Maamar Mareihem Umaaseihem. And this Maamar has made it into Torah in Parshas Yisro, which is odd. It's very, very strange. The reason it's strange is because Mareihem Umaaseihem is not the Haftarah of Parshas Yisro. Mareihem Umaaseihem is the Haftarah of Shavuos. Why it was put into Parshas Yisro can be explained, but it is a little bit odd. And I'll give you the brief version of this. According to the Kabbalah, there's a concept called Merkava, a chariot, a seat on which the Shekhinah rests. And I'm going to talk about it later, Mitzvah Hashem. But there are various Merkavos, there's various chariots. And in Kabbalah, there's the chariot of Atzilus, the chariot of Bria, the chariot of Yetzirah, the chariot of Asiyah. And these various chariots are found in different parts of Tanakh. There's a Merkava in Yeshaya, I think it's Siman Vav, Perek Vav, which we read Parshas Yisro as it happens. There's the Merkava of Yecheskel, which is in Yecheskel Perek Aleph, and again in Perek Yud, which we read on Shavuos as the Merkava of Yetzirah. And then I believe there's a Merkava of Zechariah, which we read on Chanukah and Parshas Ba'aleischa, which is considered the Merkava of Asiyah. I'm not 100% sure about this detail, but I'm almost certain. And that's the one with the menorah. In addition to all of those, there's the Merkava of Atzilus, which goes on the Ovis, which is an even higher Madrege. Every word is a different chariot, and in different places of Tanakh, they're red. In Yeshaya, you have Merkavas Bria, and in Yecheskel, the Merkava of Yetzirah, and so forth. So, Parshas Yisro, we have the 10 Commandments, Aseres HaDibros. You read about the Merkava. Why? Because when God Almighty gave us the Torah, He came down on a mountain, He rested on a mountain. In other words, He used the earth as a seat for His presence, and incidentally, tangentially, in the Beis HaMikdash, there was a Holy of Holies, and in the Holy of Holies, there was an Aron, a holy ark, and on the ark there were cherubs, there were keruvim, and the keruvim were the physical Merkava, the physical seat on which the Shekhinah rested. And of course, like it says in Chassidishe and Kabbalah, when the Shekhinah rested on the Aron and on the keruvim, the Kedusha of Elokus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu rested above the Shekhinah in the physical Beis HaMikdash. And if I may advertise, as I like to do from time to time, on my website, if you go to Parshas Truma, you'll find a class on the Aron. And if I'm not wrong, we talked at length about the Merkava. It's a class I gave many years ago, but I'm pretty sure that's what I discussed that. So Parshas Yisro, you read about Hashem coming down on a mountain and giving the 10 Commandments. You read in the Navi about the Merkava, based of course on the idea that what you read in the Parsha, you read in the Haftarah in a similar vein, in the Nevi'im, as you're reading in the Mikra, in the Torah, in the Chumash. But since we read the Aseres HaDibros twice a year, once in Parshas Yisro and once on Shavuos, and there's an answer from one of the Rabbeim. One of the Rabbeim asked his father, what's the difference between the Aseret Dibris on Yisro, the Aseret Dibris on Shavuos? And he answered that this is Melech Basada and this is Melech Behechel Malchusei. If I'm not wrong, Melech Basada is Parshas Yisro, Melech Behechel Malchusei is Shavuos. But I did not look this up. This is my recollection. And accordingly, you read the different Merkavas. But on Parshas Yisro, you read the Merkavas Yeshaya, and on Shavuos, you read Merkavas Yecheskel. In other words, in Parshas Yisro, you read the Merkava of Elam Abriya, and in Parshas and Shavuos, you read the Merkava of Elam Yetzira. What's the difference? The difference is the length of it. The Merkava of Yeshaya is a couple of psukim. There's very, very little information. The Merkava of Yecheskel is very long, with all kinds of little details. And of course, the idea is that on a higher level, the detail is less noticeable. And on a lower level, the details are even more noticeable. So therefore, Merkavas Yeshaya is so concise because there's almost no detail. Merkavas Yecheskel is so elaborate because there's far more detail to be observed because you're on a lower level. And Moshel Adavadayma, the explanation for this is very, very simple. If a bunch of people march into a palace, what do they see? If they're truly sophisticated and deep people, all they see is the king. If they are less than sophisticated, or less than very sophisticated, and less than very, very deeply connected, they're distracted. They start noticing furniture. They start noticing relatively secondary things that decorate the palace to honor the king. And as a result, the higher the level of the person, the less he notices the detail, and all he sees is the presence of the king. The lower the level of the person, the more he sees the distractions, and the less he pays attention to the king himself. And of course, the nimshal is that when you have prophets who are in one way or another experiencing visions of godliness, so the Nevi'im Arishenim, the higher prophets, have such direct vision that they don't notice that there's malachim around and that there's all kinds of mystical detail and form to represent the seat on which Hashem sits, and so forth and so on. But as the prophecies became later and later and lower, prophets were less sensitive to the direct presence of Hashem, and they started to see the furniture more, they started to see the detail more. And as a result, Yeshaya has a few psukim of detail, and Yecheskel, who lived 100 years after Yeshaya or so, has a much, much greater amount of detail. And of course, all this is quite ironic. Why is it ironic? Because these psukim are the basis for Chochmas HaKabbalah. So it turns out that the lowest prophets are the most useful in revealing to us the secrets of Kabbalah, the secrets of Torah. Because the earlier Nevi'im, when you see godliness directly, simply paid no attention to the furniture. And because they paid no attention to the furniture, they didn't describe it to us and they didn't give it to us. So although their prophecies are higher in terms of revealing what we call in our culture Ma'aseh Bereishis and Ma'aseh Merkava, they tell us almost nothing. The later prophets, in their distance from Hashem, are actually showing us and revealing to us much, much more details. And specifically, Yeshaya reveals more than Yecheskel, and Yecheskel reveals more than Zechariah. What is a Merkava? What does it mean, a chariot? And we can broaden the question and ask, what is Kabbalah? And there's a very, very important and simple answer, which of course is not comprehensive, it's not total, but it's nevertheless very, very important. And that is that the chariots, all of them, and Kabbalah, all of it, is not about God. It's about godliness. God is simple. There's nothing to be said about God except we don't know. All the form that you read about in the scriptures, in the Tanakh, in terms of the Merkava, and then later on in this Midrash Chazal and in the Gemara and in the Kabbalah. But all the form and all the detail, all of this is decoration. All of this is furniture. Like a palace. The point of a palace is a king. A king is a simple person. Takes up, relatively speaking, a small amount of space. But the entire palace is there to set the king in such a context that his presence commands honor and respect. Take that king, put him in a tent, it doesn't work. And when a palace functions properly, functions ideally, as it's supposed to, there is nothing more or nothing missing from that palace beyond what is necessary for the honor of that king. Anything beyond that is extraneous. Anything missing is deficient. And of course, in the palace, everything is perfect. And it's all about, wherever you see and whatever you look at, it leads you towards the king. You have in Tanya chapter 42, I've mentioned this many times. I happen to love this shtickle. Yeah, you come into a courtyard of a palace. You have no idea who the king is. But you see how people treat one man. I say, this must be the king. And you're not impressed by the king, you're impressed by the honor given to him by his subordinates. That's what Kabbalah is about, and that's what Merkava is about. It's not about God. It's about what we call, and we love to call it because we do it all the time, godliness. It is the framework. It is the setting, what the previous Rebbe would call the mishpitzos, the setting through which we have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God Almighty. And we can go into the whole question of, are you better off with the complexity, are you better off without the complexity? Are you better off, as the expression is, mispal l'da ze'atinek, or you're better off with the yodim l'chavim b'shem? We're not going to go into that question tonight. We're simply going to address the Kabbalistic model and the model of the Merkava as it's understood from how it was, as it's described in the Tanakh. These forms, these models, describe, so to speak, what is around God. And of course, when you say around God, you have to be very, very careful, because God is not a person and God doesn't exist in space. It is simply that this form and this space brings you into a sense of spatially centering or spatially identifying God Almighty strictly in your relationship with Him, not in absolute truth, but in your relationship with Him. Let me tell you a story. I imagine I've told you the story before, but this is such a wonderful story. I love this story as a means of bringing the idea to you. There's a woman I know, who in the first periods of her becoming frum had the rare opportunity to see the Rebbe and to interview him. And as she told it to me, I made it very clear I wasn't going to meet a rabbi. With respect, I was going to grill him, to ask him questions. It was the early 1980s. The Rebbe was no longer that accessible. And she had a connection which allowed her to do this. And she took full advantage of it. And she asked the Rebbe many, many questions. And one of the questions she asked the Rebbe, and I love this question, I think it's such a wonderful question. When you make 3 steps back, and then you make 3 steps forward, when you daven Shemona Esrei, don't you feel like a fool? You're standing in shul, you make 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, you don't feel like a fool. I get very excited when she told me this, and I asked her, so what did the Rebbe tell you? And she said the Rebbe did not respond. The Rebbe simply smiled. This woman today is making 3 steps back and 3 steps forward 3 times a day, no question in my mind. I think it's a wonderfully wise question. It's a brilliant question. Because it is foolish. You're talking to the Eibishter and when you make motions, God needs you to make 3 steps back and 3 steps forward and so forth. It's a great question. And what is the answer to the question? The answer to the question is God doesn't need us to make any steps. We need to make steps. The halacha sa'ad is supposed to have, there's all kinds of dinim of achanas haguf and achanas hamakim and achanas halev. You have to prepare yourself to daven. Those preparations are not for God. Those preparations are for you. And a significant part of those preparations are creating a space in your world for God. They're creating a time in your world for God and putting yourself physically into a condition, into a set, into a framework, into a mindset of that kind of a relationship. And part of that is having a regular place to daven, having clean clothing and organizing your body and so forth, standing, putting your feet together and approaching God as you would approach a melech basar v'dam, a king of flesh and blood. But in order to approach God, you have to step away so you can walk towards Him, so to speak. That's the idea. So all of this form that surrounds prayer is not because God needs this form, but we need to put God in front of us to have that kind of connection. Now, if you're davening in a shul with 1,000 people, everybody's doing exactly the same thing, and God is standing opposite each one of them. In other words, each one of those people mentally, spiritually, visualizes or relates to the idea of God standing opposite him or her, and he talks to God in that way. Now, how could God be in 1,000 places? And of course the answer is that it's a foolish question. God has no space. Each one of those people is creating a mental space for God in the need that they have to have that relationship. And in a higher, in a mystical level, that's what the Merkava is, that's what the Sfiras is, that's what all the worlds are about. It's all about creating a setting for a relationship with God. But the key is that we must remember that the point of the seat, and the point of the chariot, and the point of the Kabbalah is not the furniture. It's not the decoration. It's not how big or small my steps are, or how well I bow, or how poorly I bow, or how beautiful my suit is. It's about God. But the framework, the environment, everything happening around the connection itself brings you into that space. So Kabbalah tells you in each world there is a seat for the Shekhinah. And that the seat for the Shekhinah is complicated, it's not simple. This seat for the Shekhinah, which is complicated, not simple, so to speak, brings the Shekhinah, the Eibishter, into that world and to the creations of that world. They need for God to have this seat to give them access to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just like physically. Hashem is everywhere, and yet he has a home. The Beis HaMikdash, Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel, Beis HaKnesses, Beis HaMedrash, Mikdash Ma'at, and so forth. Hashem has a home. Hashem does not need a home. We need for Hashem to have a home. Beisi, Beis Tefillah, Yikarei L'chol Ha'amim. We need for God to have a space for us to be able to go there and interact with him in a way that we develop that connection. And God reciprocates. God actually sits in the home where we go to see him. God actually sits in the Beis HaMikdash, where the collective family of man goes to visit HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not because this home is absolutely special, but because since this is the space that people chose to create for their rendezvous, for their meeting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we meet him, he meets us. And of course, mystically and philosophically, you can debate which comes first, God or us and God, but the Rebbe says in the Sikha, Beis HaMedrash Bebavel, as I understand it, that in fact it's because Yidden gather there that the Shekhinah comes there. It's Jews first and the Kadosh Baruch Hu second. And just like it's true physically, it's true in all the mystical realms. Each world has a center. The center of that world is the Merkava, and of course on the Merkava sits Adam Shalach Kisei, which is representative of Payachal, of Alakus, of the Shekhinah, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so forth and so on. That's the concept of a Merkava. Merkavas are very complicated, and they have all kinds of angels, angels underneath, angels around, and so forth. And of course, when you study Tanakh and Chazal, there are so many different types of angels. There are angels which are created every day. There are angels which are forever. There are angels whose entire role is to stand in servitude of God. And there are angels who are emissaries of God, that carry out certain missions, and so forth and so on. The angels that support the seat on which God sits are obviously closest to God. They're in the inner circle. They're intimate. They're as close as one can be to the king without being the king, in fact. Hashem Shekhinah rests on the seat that they support and that they hold up. And as I said to you earlier, each word has a different Merkava with a different model and so forth. Merkeves Yecheskel describes something called Chayas, what we call in the Siddur Chayas HaKedesh. Holy animals, angels. That there's 4 of them, and to hold up the legs or the wheels of the divine seat or divine chariot. And then it says that underneath the Chayas there are Ifanim. Ifanim are also called angels, lower angels. And for the Kabbalists, Chayas are Malachim of Yetzirah, and Ifanim are Malachim of Asiyah. And as the Chayas support the Kisei, as the Malachim called Chayas support the seat on which the Shekhinah is present, so the Eifanim support the Chayas. They're like, so to speak, the angels that are called a Eifan, which means a circle or a wheel that support the Chayas. And of course, there's a reason why these lowest Malachim are called Eifanim, because in the lowest worlds, everything is curled up, like in a fetal state. The only thing that's developed is the Nehi. Similarly, the Malachim of Elam Asiyah, only the Nehi is developed at the lowest Madrig. But the Tanakh and Yecheskel, like I said to you earlier in Perek Aleph and in Perek Yud, goes into an enormous amount of detail about the Merkava, the chariot of God, and describes all kinds of stuff. The first thing he sees, read the Psukim, is Ruach Sahara, Vanan Gadol, Ve'esh Besakachas. You know what those are? Sholish Klipas Atmeyas Lagamri. He's entering into the throne of God. What does he meet? The outer, the periphery of the spiritual realms is all kinds of hell, misery, the evil. And then he makes his way through, and he gets closer and closer to the center. That's how the Psukim describe Yecheskel's vision. It's from the outside in. And of course, the center of it all is the Adam Shal HaKisei, which is the presence of Shechina and the world of Yetzirah, which Yecheskel was visualizing. One of the characteristics of this chariot, of this Merkava, which is repeated in those psukim repeatedly, is the synchrony of it all, the harmony of it all. Everybody functions as one. There's various chayas, they all move together, they move up together, they move the right together, they move the left together, they move forward together, move back together. Moreover, the malachim called Eifanim also react in kind. When the Yinasei HaChayas, Yinasei Eifanim. Everything happens with such order, such synchrony, with such a perfect choreography, it's as if they're acting as one body. Now, you can read this description and understand it in two ways. You can understand it as being a bunch of individual angels being well trained, being properly prepared to operate and sync in this choreographic, consistent order. Or you can simply say this entire seat with all of the aspects and all the angels are all in fact one block, one unit, one essence that's operating together. And they're both true, actually. They're both true. They're both true because there are many, many individual angels. But angels don't really have free will. They react to each other and they react to God. And therefore they're all in the same space, involved in the same business, which is all reacting together. And accordingly, you can describe them as many and you can describe them as one. Rambam, Maimonides, has one of the most brilliant interpretations of the Merkava I've ever seen. And what's so brilliant about it is how little he says. He doesn't explain anything. He simply tells you what to think about. The Rambam observes that if you look in the Psukim, sometimes the Merkava is described as being a series of different angels interacting. And sometimes the entire Merkava is described as one single animal, one single angel. And the Rambam says it means the same thing, whether it says Chayos, many animals, many malachim, or it says Chaya, one animal, it means the same thing. Because there are many angels, but they're operating in such a synchrony, in such a harmony, in such a unity, that you might as well call them one, In our Maamar, he's going to actually disagree, and he's going to say that there's different levels. On the lower level, there are a series of different angels that are organized to cooperate with one another. If I may add parenthetically, perhaps in spite of themselves. In other words, perhaps they would prefer to compete, but in the presence of God they get along. End of parenthesis, end of aside. And on some much higher level, where there's a unifying force that puts all the angels, so to speak, into a block model, fixes them all together into a single unit, they're called Chaya. And that is, in effect, the issue of this Maamar. The issue of this Maamar is that when you observe the same chariot, the same Merkava, from a lower level, you see variety, different angels, Chayos, Eifanim, various Chayos, various Eifanim, all doing what they do as individuals, but being synchronized, being choreographed into an Achdus. And as you may or may not know when you study in Chassidus about Achdus of Malachim, the unity of angels unity is very different than human unity. The reason angels' unity is different than human unity is because human unity without is based on human unity within. In other words, the reason I can be one with you is because within me all Jews exist, including you. And I'm unified with the you, which is within me. And you are unified with the me, which is within you, and that's the basis of the unity between you and me. It's called a real unity, real scholarless. Each one of us, every other Jew, within ourselves, and therefore when we get along, when we unify ourselves with other Jews, it's a real harmony, it's a real unity. Angels don't have that property. Every angel is different. Angel A does not have angel B within him, and angel B does not have angel A within him. And as a result, unity among the angels has to be forced, has to be superimposed. Like I said, Shalom b'Meraim. It's never a unity where the harmony is deep. It's always a unity where the harmony is, so to speak, forced. So our Maamar is going to argue that on a lower level, there's a diversity of different angels that in and of themselves would be competing, would not be getting along, but because they're all, so to speak, carrying the seat on which the Adam Shalak Kisei, the Shechina and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which rests on that particular Merkava, in that particular world, presides, there's a certain Achdus. But when you view the very same chariot from a different perspective, from a higher perspective, you see unity. And it's not either or, they're both true. On a lower level, you're seeing a bunch of distinct creations doing individual things in a harmonious way by choice. And on a higher level, you see how all this is not really a choice, it's really a superimposed harmony, on which level we're not going to call them chayos, but on which level we're going to call them chayo. And before I get to the Maamar, I will allow myself to repeat what I just said using a slightly different model. And that is, you may be familiar with the language of Chassidus of Mamalik Kalaman and Seviv Kalaman. Finite light and infinite light. What's the difference in finite light and infinite light? Of course, finite light makes itself at home in a vessel. Finite light is many. There are as many different types of lights as there are different types of vessels. Infinite light does not make itself at home in a vessel. It's too potent, too powerful, too infinite, and it's also one size fits all. And these two perspectives of the divine chariot, when you look at the chariot and see many chayas, and you look at the chariot and you see one chayah, and again, it's not a question of which chariot I'm looking at. It's the same chariot, and they're both parallel, simultaneous truth. It simply depends on the level. When you're looking at the chariot, at the angels that are supporting the Adam Shalakise, from the perspective of their personal and individual chayas, they're individual and distinct and separate. However, when you're looking at them from the perspective that there's a higher transcendent presence, which, so to speak, imposes a unity on all of them until they become one, then in fact, they are unified, and this is the idea of Seviv Kalaman. As introductions go, I think this is our longest I've ever given in these classes. Let's see, now that we spent so much time with background, let's see if we can learn the Maamar. The Pasuk says, and I want to remind you again, this is a Maamar in Parshas Yisro, which is really the Haftarah of Shavuos. Why is it in Parshas Yisro? Because since Yisro deals with Aseres HaDibros, and the Vayera Davai al Har Sinai, the Shechina resting on the mountain, so to speak, so it's appropriate to speak about the Merkava, because the notion of the Merkava is a framework and a so-called space to invite the Shechina to rest on the various different levels of Elam HaAtzilus, and Elam HaBriya, and Elam HaYetzir, and Elam HaAsiyah. And therefore it's not that difficult a thing to understand why the Alter Rebbe or the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek would include a Maamar, which is connected to the Haftarah of Shavuos, in the Parsha of Yisro. And let's read it inside. Mareihem Umaaseihem, their appearance and their function, is as one wheel sits inside another wheel. And when you read this pasuk, and again, we don't have the context in front of us, we don't have the whole Merkava, you assume is an allusion to the Ifanim, which are lower than the Chayes. Ifanim Malachim of Asiyah, and Chayes Malachim of Yitzir, but that's not true at all. Mareihem Umaaseihem is not a reference to one aspect of the Merkava versus another aspect of the Merkava. To the contrary, it's a reference to the totality of the Merkava. If you zero in and look at one aspect of the Merkava or another aspect of the Merkava, you're not going to see Haifim, not at all. It's only when you step back, you're able to take in the entire Merkava, the single, indivisible, collective, that you see Oifen B'tei Oifen. And that's what this Maamar is coming to explain. How you're looking at a complex system and seeing Oifen B'tei Oifen, which is a higher kind of a unity. Pirush, what does it mean, a wheel inside a wheel? You have a wheel and another wheel, so which is on top, which is on bottom. The outer wheel is bigger than the smaller wheel. It completely envelops and embraces the smaller wheel. But at the bottom, it's beneath the smaller wheel. It's only on top that it's above it. If you had a little wheel inside a larger wheel, the larger ball, wheel, circles the smaller eifin. So how does it all work out? It's as follows. Lim Milo as it is on top. Hu gavayim u'nayfen hakat. He's higher than the smaller wheel. However, umulmata beneath it, it's betachtes efen hakotten. It is underneath the smaller wheel, milamayla menagot, that now sits higher than the higher wheel. In other words, the smaller circle at the bottom is above the larger circle on the outside. What does that show? It shows that when you embrace something completely and you're surrounded all around, you're both higher than its highest point and beneath its lowest point. And what is the nimshal kachu? The same is also true in the notion of ruach hachaya bo'efanim, the spirit of the chaya. Loshen yachad b'efanim, and the malachim called efanim. Rabbi say, if you read the Merkava and Yecheskel, you'll see this. That in the earlier part of the Merkava, the first bunch of psukim, it never uses the word chaya. It always uses the word chayois. Many angels. Towards the end, it shifts from chayois to chaya. And as I mentioned to you in my introduction, Rambam makes nothing of it. He says it doesn't make a difference. But the Rebbe makes a very big difference out of it. He says, chayois loshen rab means you're seeing many individual angels, means you're observing them, you're viewing them, you're identifying them as individual angels, doing individual jobs towards a collective benefit, an end, but as individual contributors. Chaya means you're seeing it from a, so to speak, a bird's eye view, from a distance, and you're not seeing many, you're seeing only one. And the argument of the Maamar that it's not only that you're seeing only one, you're seeing the oneness of the godliness that makes it all unified. Like a higher light, a save of kalam, and light allows you to look at the entire Merkava and not see a bunch of different angels, but one conglomerate, one block of malachim achieving an end together. Kach, I'm on line 7, the same is true also. There's the spirit of the one angel called Chai and Eifanim. Says the Alter Rebbe Leksiv at this point in the Navi, it no longer says Ruach HaChayois, the spirit of the various angels. Although throughout the first part of the Psukim, he always says Chayois in plural. Towards the end of the Merkava, he shifts from Chayes to Chaya. We read in the first, whatever it is, 15 or 20 psukim of Merkava, that means Yecheskel, Perek Aleph, and Perek Yud, that there are 4 angels, and suddenly he shifts to 1. Elohai, and the answer is that Chekadei li yes haruach, this spirit, which our pasuk is describing, Dafke, Mimakim Elyin Me'ed, from such a lofty place, Shemai lo mata shavin lefana, that high and low are the same. In other words, distinction and diversity melt, break down. All you have is one is only when you bring an incredibly high level of godliness into the scheme. Or as I suggested before, it's almost like a save of kalaman type light. Kimashu yesed elyon. When the light comes from a very high level, yachol later the lispashet lamata, it can come down and manifest on the lowest levels, and it creates this unity. In other words, we're almost as if the Rebbe is using these words on the level of the mamali kalaman of the Merkava. In other words, the vitality and life in each individual angel, they're diverse, they're many. But on the level where there's an infinity of godliness, which is animating the malachim collectively, they're actually functioning as one. And this pasuk, Mareihem Umaaseihem, is talking about the latter idea. In other words, the psukim in the Navi first describe to the Merkava, as you would witness it from close, which malach has his own mitzvahs, and then steps back and allows you to witness the same thing from a distance and to come up with a different perception that it's all really one. Line 14. When this is the meaning of the pasuk, Ruach HaChaya, the single individual chaya. Is klolos, it is a basic and all-encompassing presence. Shel dalad achayis are the 4 malachim called chayis, and the 4 malachim called efanim, and everything around, including the chashmal and the tumult, the dot and tutzach avelt. Don't worry. Sheklalusan, that in general, what is this one presence? Ubechinas Adam. It's the face of Adam. Kipnei Ari Ela Yamin. We know that there are 4 faces to the Merkava: the face of the lion, the face of the ox, and the face of the eagle, and the face of man. But the face of the lion is to the right. Upnei Sheir Me'asmel. The face of the ox is to the left. Mashen Kim Bechinas Adam. When the pasuk describes the face of Adam, Ein Beyamin Asmel, it doesn't give him a place to the right or to the left, because Adam is not in a particular location. Adam is every place. And I want you to know that the Rambam's introduction
The Meir in the Bukham Chele Gimel, very short. He talks about this, and he says, sometimes you can look at people. All human beings look the same, pretty much, yeah? And they have the countenance of an animal. Some human beings, you look at them, they look like a lion, just fierce and intense. And sometimes you look at people and look like an ox, or like an eagle. So the Rambam's philosophy is that all the Merkava, all the Chayes HaMerkava had the Pnei Adam. Now, but then one is a Pnei Adam that looks like an Aryeh, that's leaning towards Aryeh, another one is leaning towards Shade, and then of course there's the Pnei Adam which is leading to Pnei Adam. And this of the four Chayes, the Pnei Adam, V'lachei Nikira Adam, it's also called Adam, Adam Elyon La'adam Shalakise V'chulu. Although it's one of the four legs of the Merkava, near Aryeh and Sheir and Nesher and Adam, he's like the Adam Sha'ala Kisei, the godly presence, the Shechina, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which rests on top of the Shechina, which rests on top of the Kruvim and the Kedesh HaKadoshim, it's in his image. And what the Rebbe is trying to say is that you have a level of looking at this Merkava in a diversity, Chayois. On a higher level, you're seeing only the Pnei Adam, and this is called Chaya. Line 20. B'hinei. Just like we explained it about the Eifanim, that the Merkava described in the Sefer Yechazkel. On a level of bird's eye view, as you step back and see it from higher, you're seeing an energy which encompasses the entire Merkava. It becomes, instead of many, one. Kain hu bechol ha'ishtalshalos, the same kind of idea is relevant and true in every step of the chain reaction of worlds. Berum kol dargin, from the highest of all steps to the lowest of all steps. That when you look at something from close, you see diversity. When you look at something from distance, from a more distant place, you see that there's no differences in one and the next, it's all the same. Because there's a divine light which is infinite that embraces the entire system and makes it one. She'igol makif es kol shalamata v'chol, that a circle or a save of energy encompasses everything present within that sphere, and it makes them all into one. So in other words, the Merkava has two basic perceptions. A perception we see diversity and detail, and a perception where you see oneness and unity, and the same is true in everybody's experience. All over Seder Ashtash, we have both of these ideas, which is like a Maamar Kalam and a Sefer Kalam. And the Rebbe ties it into Shavuos, line 25 now. Remember, this is again a Shavuos Maamar being recited on Parshas Yisro. Pardon me. V'lachein b'chag Shavuos, therefore the holiday of Shavuos is a Gilui shel Shara Chamishim. There was a revelation of the 50th gate, Sha'achar Mem Tes Yemei HaSfira, after the 49 days of Sfira before it. Shehem, because the 49 days of Sfira before is Mebechin Zayin, Shemesh, Sheinam, Nimchaker, they represent the 7, if you will, lesser names of God. They're not allowed to be erased, but they represent the individual characteristics of godliness. Shein Bechin, as is Pashtas, Bebechin, as Maamar Kalam, and there is a godly manifestation of individual and limited levels of godliness in a diverse way. Chesed separate, Gevura separate, Netzach separate, Hayt separate, and so forth. Liyes, and they account for Bechinas, Milo, Mata, Resh, V'chulu, higher and lower, head and feet, and so forth. That's 49 gates as the division of godliness into diversity, which would be the equivalent of looking at the Merkava and seeing Chayos, Lach, and Rabbi. Avol Shara Chamishim, as opposed to the 50th gate. It embraces all of the characteristics and aspects. There's no diversity at all. And on the level of this 50th gate, there is not a lot of detail and a lot of diversity. There is absolute oneness and unification. And on the 50th day, in the level of 50th gate, Torah was given to Yidden, making all Yidden into a conglomerate, all Yidden into a unit, making all of the Torah into a unit, and ultimately making all of creation into the same unit. Mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs leis aseh, positive commandments and negative commandments are considered one. Moreover, Amshach, Gashmi is bringing down the highest levels of godliness to the lowest worlds. There's dichotomies here, there's contradictions. But when you reveal Shara Nun, all contradictions, all diversity breaks down and becomes one. And the Rebbe says, Hu'inyan, you can summarize the idea of the 50th gate, that unifies positive and negative commandments, unifies Ein Sof and Asiyah in the words Hu Inyan Keser Torah, the crown of the Torah. That Kemei Keseres V'Atorah Shal HaRosh Malmayla. A person, of course, wears a crown on top of his head. Bebechina She'ein Ba'Bechinas Reish V'Regel V'Chulu, and the crown symbolically represents that the king is not only a king in his head and in his mind, but he's a king in the bottom of his foot. And in fact, the crown says the bottom of the toe of the king's foot is as much king as the eye in his head, or the brain in his head. That's what the crown does. It makes everything one. Therefore, it's present in the lowest levels and the highest levels as well. Like in the pasuk, and a wheel within a wheel. Again, we're not discussing the malachim called Efanim. We're talking about the entire Merkava that's observed from the outside, and instead of being Chayois, it's Chaya, Eifan B'teicha Eifan. And tangentially, incidentally, the Rebbe has a wonderful sikha in Keser Torah, which is based, of course, in the Rambam Hilchos Talmud Torah, Perek Gimel, I believe, where the Rambam brings that Sholish Ksara Nital Yisrael Yidden were given 3 crowns. There's a Keser Kahuna, Keser Malchus, and Keser Torah. And as the Chazal tell us, Keser Torah and Nachat B'Keren Zovis, the crown of Torah sits in the corner, nobody wants can have it. And the Rebbe's sikha, I think it's a Shlach sikha, which means it would be Chelik Lamed Gimel, but I'm not sure. The Rebbe develops the difference between learning Torah and possessing the crown of the Torah. It's a very, very different idea. And there are other sikhas that Rebbe talks about Keser Malchus as well. But Keser Torah doesn't just mean I have the Torah. I have the Torah on a level where it's not a body made up of many, many parts, but it's a single indivisible unit that has no aspects that are outside of that unity. Line 40. V'hinei, Hamshachazu, who brings this down? We now have 2 concepts, 49 days and the 50th day. The 49 days represents diversity, Chayois, Mamalek Alam. The 50th day represents unification, Chayah, Sevav Kalam. Hamshachazu, Haidei Bechinas Meisha, the one to bring to us, or bring us to the Torah on the level of Kesed, the 50th gate, and bring us to the 50th day, when there's a Gili of Kesed, Haidei Bechinas Meisha, it's Meisha Rabbeinu. Why? Moshe Yadaber. Moshe is the one who does the talking. Why? We know about Moshe Rabbeinu that naturally his level was ma'at, 1 drop less than Elikim. Elikim would be 50 gates, and Moshe Rabbeinu was naturally blessed with 49 shekol. He had 49 gates. He was missing only the 50th gate. He was so close to the 50th gate, and therefore he was worthy. Moshe as a person was perfect in Mamalek Alam and in all 49 gates, and therefore he was the representative, he was the shliach, he was the emissary to raise us and himself for the 49th to the 50th gate. Line 45, and I think I'm going to start next week from here, but I want to read the next few lines anyway. That's why it was Moshe Rabbeinu that brought to us Hayud Gimel Midas Arachim, 13 attributes of mercy. And with Hashem's help, when we talk about it next week, I'm going to show you in the nuance of this Maamar, that the Yud Gil Midas Arachmim are higher than the Torah. They're higher than the Torah we got at Har Sinai. And Moshe was able to bring down the 13 principles of mercy with a higher than the Torah, because he reached the 50th gate. That he called Havaya Havaya. And who is he? Moshe Rabbeinu was able to call the 50th gate through call of him Shechavaya V'chuli. He was the one who was able to reveal and bring forward the 13 attributes of mercy, which are higher even than the Torah Peter Shapasik, the way you read it. Vayavar Hashem al Ponav. God Almighty passed before Moshe Rabbeinu. Of course, you know the Kabbalah. Vayavar Havaya. Havaya is Ishtalshalus. Vayavar Havaya al Ponav. Ishtalshalus passed Moshe Rabbeinu by, and Moshe was raised to a madrega of higher than Ishtalshalus. Vayikra Moshe, and Moshe called. Moshe passes by the madrega of Shem Havaya B'Ishtalshalos, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was able to reach the Gilma Midas Rachmim, and Vayikra doesn't go on the Eibush, that it goes on Moshe Rabbeinu. Shehei Mekedes L'Hishtalshalos. Moshe Rabbeinu reads the Gilma Midas Rachmim, which is the source of Hishtalshalos. In other words, Elam Asatilas V'Choli, and therefore he's in a position to reveal the 13 attributes of mercy. We're going to call this a class for the benefit of what we read, and especially for the benefit of what we haven't read yet. Because to do the rest of this Maamar in the time that remains would be filibuster at least. So we learned the point of the Maamar, that the Merkava has two aspects, a Yesher and an Igel. The Yesher is the description of the detail, and the Igel is how you see all the detail woven into a fabric, into an achtas, into a oneness. In the Merkava it's about Malachim, and in Ishtashos it's about Seva, which is higher than Malay, and this is accomplished through Moshe Rabbeinu. And in the next Maamar, next Shir, we're going to be talking how this ties into the Torah, and how the Yom Midas Arachamim are higher than Torah, also connected to the difference between Avraham Avinu and Aaron HaKohen, which we brought up many times before, and there'll be other very nice details to enrich the second half of the Maamar, which we'll do with Hashem's help, of course, next week.